If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members. Unlimited defense budgets, unmatched legal expertise. Carry the same level of support police officers have. Carry CCW Safe, the highest caliber.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Survival Dispatch on a Sunday evening where the topic could not be more apropos for what is going on in our country currently. So we're going to get right to it. But first of all, I am John Wheaton, the founder of the Righteous Savages and your host for this evening. So as usual, I run the Sunday night and the Tuesday night shows for those of you who are new. And with me, as always, is my good friend and fellow anti-communist S2. How are you, brother?
Oh, I'm having a ball watching everything that's going on right now.
Yes. So tonight we get more into really the modern day, as we have been going through this series on communism, socialism, Marxism, all sides of the same coin of authoritarianism and evil. But today we talk about our own country and what we have seen from the 1960s briefly into really today, and how they are trying to dismantle a Christian-founded nation, a nation that is founded on biblical principles, and by infiltrating in all of our government institutions, the ideologies of DEI and deconstructing the family that has been posited by our own government, the LGBTQ rainbow jihad that is rotting the Christian foundations of the West, and the church embracing communist ideologies through BLM and other ideologies like critical theory, which critical race theory is a kind of a cousin to. And these are in order to placate and not be controversial in the name of the new woke gospel. And we're going to get into all of that tonight. So before we get into that, I want you guys to, if you are new with us, to go over and sign up for a free Substack account. We do a lot of content over on Substack, and that is going to give you guys access to the Saturday Watch Guide now as a free member. It's something we're adding for free members on our Substack, and that's going to give you the Watch Guide, which is going to give you alerts on things that are going on. And we are obviously being suppressed on most of our platforms. We have a large following, and it seems like our videos don't make it out very far to people because we're being suppressed by big tech. And one of their number one methods of attack is to just suppress your content. And there's no reason that a YouTube channel with 430,000 subs should only get a few thousand views on a video. Most in that realm get tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of views on every video that they put out. So it's obvious that we're being suppressed. So help us out. Make Substack, where it's actually a way for us to get you this content and this information for free. There is also paid memberships that you get more content and more access to things. But if you guys would simply go over and sign up for a free account, you're going to get a lot of content for free. And then also consider doing a paid membership as well. Okay, before we get to the main story, and what's really ironic about this is really very much in the same realm as what we're going to be talking about in our main topic. So we're just going to kind of flow through this thing, and I'm going to let S2 talk to this. We both have been watching this. I've had this streaming on my TV here in the studio all afternoon while I was putting everything together. And so we're just going to get right into it. because communism is in many forms. And this is what is going on in California with the ICE riots is a perfect example. We've already seen this. We have already seen this in many things over the last 5 years, especially in 2020. So let's watch this, or let's go to our first story, and that is the history of the protest that is going on. And so this is this is from CBS News. What to know about the Los Angeles immigration protests after a citywide ICE operation. And this is to kind of jump ahead. Obviously, the latest thing is that the president has taken control of the California National Guard on the federal mandate and is moving troops into it. But ICE had executed search warrants, 40 plus detentions, and then crowds gathered to try and block the agency buses. This was, I believe, Friday. And so this is the crowds gathered and they tried to block the buses. And this is important for us because this is defiance of lawful authority, and it's mocking what we know as to be justice. Because we have laws against people who are here illegally staying, and they have not been enforced to this magnitude in a long time. So, S2, real quick rundown. This is really just the left trying to seed, in my opinion, trying to seed and stoke the fires to try and get us more divided.
Oh no, the fires are already stoked. That has nothing to do with it. What they're trying to do is, their plan is to impede and slow down everything. That's exactly what they're trying to do, because they're trying to run out this clock with Trump being in office. So these protests and everything, I'll give you a case in point. It was just broken about 4 minutes ago that out in LA, the protesters were starting to move towards the highways to block the highways. Well, one of the things that they had put out I guess it was a couple of years ago, was choke points. And highways are one of the choke points where they block logistics. They can potentially block any outbound traffic out of LA, which is where these buses would be going back to the deportation centers. So the fire's already stoked, and what a lot of people aren't getting out of all of this is these people that are at these protests, these are, some of them are government operatives from other countries. This is what they were trained to do. And they also don't understand that the vast majority of the Americans that are there are radical socialists. That's what they are.
Mm-hmm. Well, trained Marxist, courtesy of your government education system.
Yeah, exactly.
So it looks like 118 were arrested this week, including 44 people on Friday's operations. Those arrests include 5 people linked to criminal organizations and people with prior criminal histories, DHS said. Following the Friday arrest, protests gathered in the evening outside of the federal detention center chanting, "Let them free, let them stay." Some of the signs with anti-ICE slogans and some scrawled graffiti on the building. So moving to the next, this is a video. Start it from the beginning here.
Riot police faced off against anti-ICE protesters in downtown Los Angeles on Friday evening. The tense confrontation came after a day of federal immigration raids across the city. Dozens of people were reportedly taken into custody. This eyewitness footage appears to show one such raid, in which caravans of unmarked military-style vehicles and vans loaded with uniformed federal agents streamed through LA. ICE agents targeted several locations, according to the Los Angeles City News Service, as part of President Donald Trump's extensive crackdown on illegal immigration. Trump has vowed to arrest and deport undocumented migrants in record numbers.
They're illegal
A video of
aliens.
the subsequent protest showed LAPD officers lined up on a downtown street wielding batons and what appeared to be tear gas rifles. Angelica Salas is the executive director of the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights.
Our community is under attack and is being terrorized.
So, this is to me completely and totally. It's flipping the script. It's gaslighting to everybody. Here's some more footage. National Guard troops arrive in LA after immigration protests turned violent. Now, let's be clear. The violence started on one side. The violence started from the protesters, and they're out there screaming. I was listening to a live stream that somebody was commenting on YouTube, and they're constantly saying, "Why are you attacking unarmed people?" Well, they're using tear gas, not tear gas rifles. They're tear gas launchers. They're not rifles. They don't shoot like actual bullets at people. They are launchers that send these into a crowd. They're rather harmless, and they're meant to agitate and irritate to get you to move along.
Something else that the mainstream media is not telling you either, they're not showing you this, is that they were being attacked. People in the crowds throwing water bottles at them. I mean, frozen water bottles and pieces of concrete block at them. That's what they're not showing you.
And the other thing is that the police were given stand down orders. That's the reason that the National Guard has been brought in. Is that the police, in many cases, were given stand down orders, and there are literally videos that people have posted of 40, 50 police standing by while they loot and destroy, set things on fire. I mean, it's just this is. When we have talked in this series on communism about revolutions and protests and all this, this is exactly what they look like throughout history. It's this kind of crap. And this is a Marxist push to try and destabilize. And I don't know particularly what their end goal is. I mean, their end goal obviously is to take over in a communistic view. But we have to understand that these people can play the victim really well, and
their end goal is to destroy capitalism.
Correct.
Full stop.
And that's a very interesting point, because what is capitalism? Let's do a little definitional stuff here, because they always talk about capitalism and they want you to think that capitalism means the really wealthy oligarchs that are making money and doing backroom corrupt deals, getting government contracts and all this stuff. They want you to think of people like Jeff Bezos and all this kind of stuff. What capitalism is at its core is private property ownership.
Yep.
That's what it is. So what they're saying when they're anti-capitalist, they're anti you having your own things that you can call yours. This is why I'm so against property taxes. If you own property, you should not have to pay taxes on them.
And that includes your children too, by the way.
Yep. So
because they view you having children and raising your children as property.
Yep. Velcro, I agree. Killdozer would be good now. So this is a dark area. The one thing that I will say that's awesome about this is the fact that we are getting swift responses by the administration. Pete Hegseth put out, you probably saw it on the video, we're activating the National Guard on its federal mandate. It's going into Los Angeles. We're not going to let this stuff go on like it did in 2020, where it went on for days and weeks and months. And I think really what this has to do with it, I don't know if you guys don't follow the Supreme Court. A couple of weeks ago, they basically said that Trump absolutely has the power to deport people.
Mm-hmm.
So he is going full bore. Good. And notice also that they're rounding up people that are related to criminal activity. They're starting there, which is where you should start. Now, I'm all for more. Let's get all of the illegals out of this country. And obviously that's, the bleeding heart side of the liberal people out there are like, oh, we can't do this. No, they broke the law. They're already criminals. They may not be violent criminals, but they're already criminals. And you do not have a nation unless you have sovereignty, unless you have laws, unless you have rules that have to be followed by everyone.
And that's what the socialists want to eliminate.
Yep.
Because that's part of capitalism.
Yes. And I'll also point this out because I always try and tie this to biblical thing. God always, there's multiple references within Scripture of the lawlessness, the lawless one. In fact, Satan is called the lawless one. Socialism and communism is based off of destabilizing and making a land lawless. And then the select few take control. But it's still lawless. And so we are on this precipice of, these ideologies are not dead in our country. They're still going. And it's very, very prevalent. So before we move on to our main topic, which is we're just going to be rolling right into some historical context and then coming right back to what we're seeing now. But S2, do you have anything else to add about this?
I think the response that is occurring right now is very, very different from what they had before, and I don't think that they were expecting that the law enforcement or that the administration was going to be prepared for this. I think they thought they were just going to carry on like they did in 2020, and that's not exactly what's happening right now. And the other problem you have too is that you also have Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum. She's also down in Mexico egging this on, and they're having problems in Mexico with riots as well. So this is going on all over the place.
As you see with communistic ideology, because as we've gone through history, the Chinese stuff happened very similarly at the same time that the Russian stuff happened, and it just fed all of these other countries. And you see these waves of revolution, and they don't just typically happen in one place. They happen in multiple places. So it's what you're seeing. And, honestly, guys, we need to pray that this stuff doesn't take hold, because it's really important that we keep this out of our country and we boot out the stuff that's already taken root. And with that in mind, now we talk about the cancer of critical theory and critical race theory and all of the other things that have infiltrated the ideology inside of our education institutions, our government, and even our churches, as sad as it is for me to say. All of this stuff is like a wolf in sheep's clothing. It sounds good on the surface, and then when you dig into it, it is absolutely evil. The infiltration of Marxism through education system since the 1960s, when they removed God out of the classroom, prayer, and everything else that this country was founded on. The government institutions, the ideologies of DEI and deconstruction of the family, the LGBTQ, rainbow jihad, as I love to call it, because it is clearly a ideological war being waged against our founding roots in the West. The church embracing communist ideologies, it's all a part of the plan for the Marxist. So we get to our first thing is to talk about 1962 and Engel versus Vitale. I think it's really interesting that one of the people in this case is Engel, considering Engels was the first guy that
Frankfurt School.
Yeah. So that's what
it was Engels, not Engel.
Yes, yeah. So one little letter, but it's just almost like poetic justice. But the ends the voluntary school prayer, and this was a voluntary thing, but it was ended because it was considered it was a misinterpretation by the Supreme Court on the establishment clause, because it's not actually establishing a religion. And that is a commonly misquoted portion of the Constitution, because that is not the intent. The intent is not to have a government religion that the government imposes on everybody. It does not say that you cannot have religion. In fact, if you read the founding fathers and what they wrote about that, they were very pro-prayer, very pro-God in theirs, otherwise they would not have based the Constitution on Scripture. But this is an article from the Heritage Foundation talking about dismantling. I think this is the wrong article.
Yeah, I couldn't find the link to it.
Oh, okay. I must have put the wrong article in there. Anyways, quick talk on that. Quick talk on this on the Engel versus Vitale. It ending voluntary school prayer. It was the last formal link between public education and biblical morality, and it was important to It's important to the American Christians, conservatives, and that's how this country was founded. It was to cut and sever the kids' tie to God's word, and as a blow to conservatives, and we must actually we need to fight to get these things back. In fact, there are some states that have actually re-implemented this. Oklahoma is one of them, and this was within the last couple of months. We cannot
Actually,
have.
It was last year.
Was it last year? Okay.
Yep.
There was something else. I guess I got that mixed up. There was something else that Oklahoma was trying to do recently. But so now we look at this. What S2 actually just brought up was the Frankfurt School. And this is the birthplace of critical theory. And S2, I'm going to put you on the spot, if you don't mind, and see if you want to give a quick kind of synopsis of critical theory. If not, we can both talk about it. It's not a big deal.
Well, critical theory basically says that everything is racist. I mean, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Everything is racist. Math is racist, everything is racist, because the way it's termed as everything that has to do with capitalism is racist.
Yeah, and so it's based off of this whole thing, and you guys have probably heard this language. They break everything down between oppressors and oppressees. Who's being oppressed and who's doing the oppressing. This is so that they can divide everybody on the lines of along the lines of whatever the wedge issue is. And so as we've gone through this, in China and Russia, it was class warfare. So they divided the oppressors and the oppressees along class lines. It's hard to do that in the class. Go ahead.
Well, and they did that because what they were trying to do is to build a classless society where equality was the big driver of all of this. I mean, they even had some semblance of this, some interest in this in the 1930s during the Depression, because of the wage disparities that were going on. And that was during that time, that was the birth of the unions. And what's more communist than a union, or socialist, I should say? What's more socialist than a union?
Yeah. The ultimate protection. And
so what they look to do with the whole oppressor versus oppressed is they look to wipe out the middle class. And then eventually what happens is the middle class is absorbed into the lower class, and then they become the complete oppressed class. And then the oppressed class goes after the minority, which is the upper class people. And then when they wipe out the upper class people, then all of a sudden, voila, we now have our classless society. But the problem with it is there's human nature involved here. And when you have human nature, you have greed. And when you have greed, you have people that are going to come out on top, because they are the ones that are going to basically reap whatever it is that they have taken over. And they all of a sudden become the upper class, which is what you have in almost every form of politics these days. Yeah.
And so, and that's a very, that's a rabbit hole you could go for miles down. But, when it comes to their assault on our country, because the way our country was founded on capitalism, remember, every time I say capitalism, think private property. It says life, liberty, and property, not the I forget the what is commonly misquoted of that statement is
life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Pursuit of happiness. It's actually life, liberty, and property is what they were talking about. So that's where we were founded, on the rights of people to own their own property, to own their own areas to say this is why we have things like the Second Amendment too. And I always go back to that, but that's why, is so that you could defend your property against people that want to come and take it. So anytime that I say capitalism, I'm saying private property. And if we break it down, the reason that they use capitalism is because they have been able to misconstrue that as some sort of thing attached to corporate greed. And that's what they want you to think. And then that's how they turn people against that. But the reality is it's about the everyday man being able to own property.
Well, it's not just about that, John. Now, I said this earlier, that they also view your kids as private property as well. And I know we're going to get into talking about this in a little bit, but when we start talking about the LGBTQ stuff and we start talking about marriage between a man and a woman, they also consider marriage to be a form of slavery.
Correct.
So, and they associate slavery with racism. So, and this is how they twist it.
Absolutely. And so moving to what has happened. So this is within the last 4 years. So the long march through the institution has been going on. I would argue that it really got jet fuel thrown on it in 2008. We saw a massive shift when Barack Obama became the president. So maybe 2009. I was in the military at the time. I saw a massive shift in the ideological views of the military, how training was done. We were no longer training for war. We were training to become woke drones. And so we would have to do all of these different diversity trainings. And what's hilarious about that is that if you want to know one of the most diverse communities in the country, it's the freaking military. And yes, guess what? Everybody makes slur jokes. Everybody does all of that kind of stuff. It's built into the military. There's also a rule in the military: if you are not giving somebody crap, if you're not like razzing them, or I guess people could say bullying. If you're not bullying each other, you don't like each other. And this was a rule in every military unit that I've ever been in, and it's probably a rule in your military units as too. As if if somebody was giving you crap, that meant they liked you. So the diversity of the community and the ability to get past all of those triggering things, it was built into the military.
Shit, in my day, if you didn't get into a fight with somebody in your barracks once a week, you weren't doing it right.
Right, exactly. So the implementation of that, but in more recent time, in 2021, there was a change to Title IX. And this change to Title IX, and this was one of the rulings that I saw Justice Neil Gorsuch actually go crazy on, as far as like something I didn't agree with, was that they actually put in that gender identity was now a part of the Civil Rights Act. There were also two executive orders, 13985 and 14035 in 2021, that started to unravel this and allow the gender ideology to get into Title IX. What does that do? Well, it basically erases women's sports over time, because now you are required to allow biological men who identify as women to perform in sporting events. And it basically turns women into, because spoiler alert, guys, and we're not going to back off of this, the average man versus the average woman, the average man has over twice the amount of strength as an average woman. This is true even on the top tier athlete side. Serena Williams, one of the greatest female tennis players of all time, basically said she would be ranked like 600th if she played in the men's leagues. Now, she dominated that sport for almost 2 decades, and she is self-aware enough to say, yeah, there's no way I could beat a man. Not any, maybe the Joe Blow that's like drinking beers on the weekend that doesn't really play tennis that much, but an actual tennis player that trains, she would get absolutely destroyed by a male. What this does is it opens up the door to basically undo everything that Title IX was about. So this is more blurring of the lines along the ideology of not just classless. So let's take that classless that S2 was talking about, and let's say genderless. So they want a classless and genderless society.
Yep.
That's kind of crazy. You know?
Exactly.
And so it's blurring the lines, and it's really just so that they can divide and conquer. This is what this has always been about. And so this is a very dangerous thing. You know, I now have a 4-year-old daughter, and she's very athletic. I mean, I can already tell this girl's going to be amazing in sports. She's 4, and she can already just destroy in gymnastics, and is moving up to the advanced stages in gymnastics for her age group. But she, you know, when it comes to when she gets older, are we going to have to basically deal with, oh, well, there's a biological male that's going to win the gold medal at every event, so you're just playing for second. And that's what we're seeing. Like, this literally has been happening. There was a video that went viral a couple of weeks ago of a sporting event where a biological male won at a female sport event. The second place contender was a girl, and the crowd went crazy for the girl in second place. And when the boy got his award, everybody booed. So people are already fed up with this. The problem is they already did this in the government via executive order and the ridiculous ruling out of the Supreme Court. So we're already seeing this starting to take hold even more than it has before. S2?
Yeah, I pretty much have spoken my piece on just about all of this stuff. It's all about the destruction of capitalism, and every bit of this. I mean, hint, folks. Communists hate women. Okay, they don't view them. They don't view them the way we view them. They view them as something, as an object to be used as they see fit.
Yes. And what's ironic is when you actually look back, there's been a lot of feministic, like feminism ideology intertwined in some of the older communist movements. What's really funny about that is that should tell you how much feminism is anti-female at its roots. It absolutely is, because it takes women away from the things that God created them to do, and it tries to basically fit them into the roles of a man, and it's destroyed the family. So that gets us to this next point. So this is a article from Heritage. I love Heritage stuff, but the welfare cliff, and this goes back to the 1960s. I'll get to in a minute, but how welfare programs discourage marriage and the case for pre-K education subsidies. So this is talking about specifically that I think it's like 42% of babies, and this was as of 2023, it's probably even higher now, are born to unwed mothers. There are extensive amounts of data about the impact of homes without both parents in them. So this is where we go back to the 1960s, and LBJ, one of the most racist presidents in the history of this country, implemented this for the Black community. He destroyed the Black community, who was in the 1950s the highest percentage of families of any ethnicity in the United States that had both parents in the home. Very strong family unit. Within 2 decades, it was the lowest. And this was by the implementation of welfare, the implementation of the Great Society. And welfare basically replaces the commission of the father in the home. So now a female can have kids, and we incentivize that by giving more subsidies the more kids that you have out of wedlock. It's and this is a Marxist ideology, because it is replacing someone in the home with the government. It's making the government God. It's making the government father. And that is a brokenness. Fatherless homes account for the vast majority of violent crime, the vast majority of poverty, and the vast majority of kids not getting a thorough education. So we have seen this erosion of what God's design was. God's first thing that he did for mankind was design the family. And said, be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth and subdue it. In other words, have a lot of kids and stay together if at all possible. So it's a broken system, and it's by design of these people that want to erode the very foundations of what our country was built on. S2?
Yeah, welfare was a social experiment for sure, and it was actually thought up at none other place than Harvard University. It was supposed to be a temporary thing that came around, and it ended up that it worked so good to turn the inner city youth against each other that they thought, yeah, let's just go ahead and keep that there. It really was never about supporting a single parent household. It was more about how can we destroy this part of society.
Correct.
And if you look at it, Margaret Sanger, she was a black woman and she was a eugenicist.
Right.
So, and then of course we had Planned Parenthood out of that, which basically, once again, takes away the responsibility from the woman for birth.
Yes.
So we go back to the root of things, and what Satan looks to destroy is the woman, because everything is born of woman. Everything.
Yep. Without women, our society crumbles. And this is what we're seeing with birth rates plummeting, women not getting married. And this is all a result of feminism, which I would also say is a construction of evil and communism, because it takes away the beauty of what a woman actually represents. You know, women were not designed to go fight wars. They were designed to make our country more civilized. You know, men conquered the world. That's throughout history. But women turned the world into a civilization. If it was left up to guys, I tell you what, if it was my house, like there would be nothing but like dead animal heads on the wall and firearms. You know, I mean, most guys would be like, yeah, that sounds cool. But, you know, without that, we do not have the comforts and the beauty that we have in society, because men tend to like to break things. So we need women. We need those to be the cornerstone of that. So yes. So real quick, yes, Margaret Sanger was not black. I think it was just S2. He misspoke. That's not a big deal. But she was actually Jewish, but she was very anti-black person. So yeah.
Yeah, I apologize. I misspoke. No. That was what I meant to say, was that she was anti-black.
Yes. No, you're fine. You're fine. That's I just wanted to clear that up before somebody freaks out on us. But yes, she was a eugenicist. She was ironically very, very she was looked on a great light by people like Adolf Hitler, by the way. Isn't that interesting? So the eugenicists of the early 1900s like gave birth to a lot of this extermination theory that was implemented by the Nazis, but was implemented by the communists. They all work very, very much hand in hand in a lot of ways. So, so moving on, here is the federal level. So what is our government actually done in this to open up the ideologies of critical theory and DEI and all of those things? So this is from 2023. So the Biden administration, as a part of one of its mandates, was to install a designated leader to spearhead diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, DEI. You guys have heard us rail against that for years, ever since it became a term.
Support every immigrant? I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, yes, exactly. But we do have to look at these government initiatives that really started to upend and destroy and rot our institutions from the inside out. And really, I go back, and this probably, as I said earlier, had jet fuel thrown on it with the advent of the Obama administration. When Obama took office, he laid the groundwork for a lot of the things that we're seeing the fruit of now. Because even when Obama took office, race relations in the country were not as bad as they are now. I can definitely guarantee you this. Apologies, I didn't have the right screen showing. But so this is from the Federal Times. But in all honesty, Obama was one of the most divisive presidents. I mean, everybody wants to think that Trump is divisive. Trump is not anywhere close to as divisive as Barack Hussein Obama. That man is the most divisive public figure that I've ever seen. And he does it with his, his charisma and all of this kind of stuff, his wannabe, TV star, movie star. But make no mistakes, he was one of the major catalysts for this in our country, and opened up the floodgates that had been somewhat held back over the previous few decades. S2, any words on the federal government and what the federal government has done to basically take away a merit-based system that was about hiring the best people for the job and replacing it with a quota-based system of DEI?
Once again, it's the destruction of capitalism. It's merit-based societies don't have any place in the communist society. Everybody is equal, everybody has equal opportunity, everybody's outcomes are equal. And this was one of the things. It's interesting because there's been a lot of talk over the last couple of days about the Civil Rights Act and how this all took with affirmative action and all of this stuff. And well, okay, so I believe that the Supreme Court ruled against affirmative action this past year as well. And if we look at all of the things that were supposed to have been accomplished in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, a lot of the Supreme Court decisions are really taking away the necessity for the Civil Rights Act. And there's been a lot of talk over the last couple of days about the repealing of the Civil Rights Act and the blowback that could occur if that were to happen, because all of a sudden the Dems, the communists, the socialists, and everybody would stand up and say, oh, that's racist. You can't do that. That was meant for black people. No, it wasn't. It was meant to basically put everybody on a level playing field to have equal opportunities. Equal outcomes do not equal opportunities.
Correct. And that's where we get into a lot of this stuff with CRT. Critical theory is the father of critical race theory. It's just that critical race theory is the division of these things upon a race, obviously, hence the name. But it is a way for them to divide and conquer within that. And the reasons that we cannot have things like critical theory embedded in our theology as Christians is because it's completely antithetical to the gospel. And the Bible clearly says you cannot serve two masters. You will love one and hate the other. You cannot serve God and serve a government that wants to impose its will upon other people, and trying to take from someone who may have worked for what they have. And this is a biblical principle too. If you do not work, you do not eat. That's straight out of the Bible. And it is basically saying that, no, we're going to take away from the people that have worked, the people that have put in the extra hours and have been successful. And we're going to take from them, we're going to give to the people that don't have anything. And in a lot of cases, there are exceptions, but in a lot of cases, people that are on welfare, no matter whether they're white, black, gray, or orange, it typically is a incentivization for them to not continue to try and better themselves. I know a lot of people on welfare that just play Xbox all day and don't look to get a job. And I'm talking able-bodied people. So this is a false ideology that opens up the door for laziness and not being industrious and not trying to better yourself. Put that hand in hand with the drug epidemic that we have in our country, and it's a breeding ground for people not doing what we're designed to do. So with that being said, we're going to move into Black liberation theology. If you guys don't know what this is,
Yay.
Back to Mr. Barack Obama. Many of you guys remember his pastor, Jeremiah Wright, famously said, not God bless America, God damn America. Basically saying that we were a colonizing, evil empire that had grown and forced our ways on the backs of slavery, that the country was built by slaves. This is straight out of, like, you see the 1619 Project that came out about 6 years ago, where they talk about how, America was never good. America was always bad. This is communistic playbook 101. So it's this theology is basically antithetical to the gospel, is the theory of blackness and affirmation of black humanity that emancipates black people from white racism. And essentially it grows racism towards white people. So you see, they've done studies on this, and I'm sure you've read this S2, but they've done studies like asking white people, how much does your race matter to you? And it's like less than 20% of white people like, it's a big deal for me. But when you talk to black people, it's like 80%. That like race is what really makes them is a integral part of their life. And so it's easy to divide those based off of race, because it's been embedded in them through society, culture, and all of these politicians telling them lies that somehow they're overly discriminated against. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, S2, but if I am told something long enough, it starts to become the truth in my mind. It may not be the truth, but it will start to become the truth. You'll start to read situations. You'll start to read messages and text messages and emails in a different light and think, well, that person's racist, because it's embedded in your mind. Oh, that person is racist.
It's confirmation bias.
Correct. So there was a growing thing in the 1960s. We saw this, when you look at the riots, 1968.
It was the whole Black Power thing.
Correct. Use the Black Panthers, all of that kind of stuff. The positization that Jesus was a poor black man, all of this kind of stuff. He was Middle Eastern. He was not black. So let's set the record straight there. And I don't know if you've seen many Middle Easterns. They tend to come in multiple different shades. So we don't know what his skin color was technically, but we know that he was Middle Eastern because he was born in the area of Israel. So this is a gathering based off of skin color. So they're trying to steal the ideology and say that because Jesus had a dark skin color, or they think he had a dark skin color, that all of a sudden they're in the right. And that was what led to the oppression, the idea of the oppression of rich white people. So this is you see what I'm doing here. This is communism. This is Marxism. It is dividing on lines of whatever a wedge issue is. So we're using wealth and we're using skin color. And that's where this all bled out from. So as that goes on, what do we see in 2020?
Was that a question for me?
No. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself real quick. One other thing I want to follow is specifically this last thing, and then I'm going to turn to one specific incident. So one of the other things that has happened, and this is an article from First Things. This is talking about a translation of the Bible I didn't actually know existed because it only existed for about 8 years, and that was the TNIV. Should look that up at some point. Zondervan was the publisher of a new translation of the Bible. So most people have heard of the New International Version. It's the most commonly used version of the Bible throughout the English speaking world, because it's commonly translated to be able to understand across multiple English speaking languages, because different dialects and different meanings of words. It's been very, very popular. My son has an NIV Bible, but they wanted to overhaul it to have inclusive language. This was in 2002 that it was originally translated. And it was to remove the references to stuff like brethren and make it people and all of this kind of stuff. But it was rooted in the gender fluidity ideology, as many of the people that were involved in the translation said at the time. It was met with an extreme vitriol by very, very world-renowned theologians, including John Piper and I forget the guy that did systematic theology, but some of the biggest theologians in the Christian world basically said, no, this is complete bull hockey, and we've got to get rid of this. So it died off in 2011. So there's even been attempts, these were early attempts within the church to try and instill these communistic ideologies via the Bible. So it's kind of insane to me that all of this has been going on, and I didn't even know about this until I started doing research over the last week. So
how many iterations of the Bible have there ever been? I mean, this just goes back to show you how long this has been going on, because of all of the iterations and the things that were removed and the things that have been added. And the true scripture says you don't add anything to God's word.
Correct. And one other bright thing this is from July of last year, before we move to the last piece of this, because it's the biggest one. Liberal leaning churches are shrinking compared with many conservative churches. There is something stirring, guys. I know we all feel it. It's just like the response to these riots. It's different now. It's like, no, we're not going to put up with this anymore, guys. We're done. We're done. We're not going to play your game. And because of that, we're just going to push back. We're done with this crap. And I think it's happening within the church, which is good, because the church is really going to be the barometer on how far this goes, because as whether you like it or not, and I personally love it, our country was founded on biblical principles. So if you stop adhering to those biblical principles, our country will not survive. I can say that full stop.
Yeah, socialist, you had your playtime in the yard. Now it's time to go stuff yourself back into the hole and weld the hole shut.
Correct. So what in the world? I'm having a link problem here. Okay, here we go. Our last bit is the biggest one, because it's the most recent one that we can use as an example of, I hate these ads on these websites. And that is Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter was really, it was a boiling point. And I really think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I really think that 2020 was that pendulum swing all the way out. Of course, we got the 4 years of the fake Biden presidency, but I think it was the far end swing. And I think ever since then, everybody's been really pushing back the other way. The pendulum, I think, is swinging back. Remember that Patrice Colliers, who was the co-founder of BLM, openly said on national TV, we are trained Marxists. We are trained Marxists. In other words, they have been schooled in Marxist ideology. They have been schooled in all of this stuff we've been talking about throughout this series. S2?
Yeah. I remember that. It's, how do I say this? I mean, we knew that there was something going on with BLM. We knew a long time ago, just listening to them talk. I personally had gone to a number of these protests out there where they showed up, and to stand there and listen to them talk, they were always about revisionist history. They would always go up there and they would tell stories about Martin Luther King that weren't true. And then they would come back and they would say, I know my history. And I'd come back and I'd say, yeah, no, you don't. You're trying to rewrite history, and this is part of what you're doing. So we knew that there was something going on with those folks a long time ago. And in true form, uh, they took money from people as donations in the name of somebody else who died or something, got shot or whatever, and they took that money just like as I said, what ends up happening is the lower class attacks the upper class, and a certain portion of that lower class becomes the new upper class, and that's what they did.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so the mandates that are the charter of BLM specifically talked about things like including gender ideologies, deconstructing the Western prescribed nuclear family. So that's both parents in the home, male and female, married. It's a crazy, crazy thing that we see. Basically, they're openly saying it. What's really crazy is how many people in the church, how many people, even in the kind of middle of the road conservative movements, started to embrace some of this stuff, because it's all rooted in, or it's all clothed in this, sheepskin of, well, we just want things to be fair. We just want things to be equal. We just want, those that have it worse off to be to have a leg up. Well, most people are like, well, yeah, I understand that. But the problem is what goes along with that, as always is with communism, is because they remove God. And without God as the guiding light in these things, it turns into greed, and it turns into power grabs, and it turns into actual oppression of people that don't agree with your ideology. Because this is where cancel culture came from, guys. Remember all those people that were speaking out about this, speaking out about a lot of things in 2020, whether it be the jab, whether it be the BLM riots, whether it be all of the craziness that was going on, the truth about medical stuff. And you see all of these people start to be deplatformed, start to be suppressed, start to be quieted in the digital era.
And it was also a typical communist tactic as well, where we talk about shaming. Everybody was afraid to be called a racist or a bigot or anything like that, even if it wasn't true. Everybody was so afraid of that. And once you get called that so many times, eventually it becomes completely ineffective. And I think that's what we started to see, because the American people are a different breed. We're not Europeans. We
Correct.
don't give a crap what you say about us.
Exactly. And the thing is like, the nature of Americans is really because of our rooting and grounding in biblical principles. Unlike any country in Europe, we are a giving people. We are a helpful people. We help our fellow man, our fellow Americans. We're the most giving country as far as it comes to foreign aid, missions. And I'm not talking about governmentally. I'm talking about like individual donations to good causes. Like we're number one, and it's not even close. But we have to guard against these ideologies, specifically when they start to wedge themselves into the church, into the truth of the Bible, and they start to web these lies into our doctrine. Because Black Lives Matter was, they used the convenience of George Floyd's drug overdose.
You mean the plan?
And conveniently left out the important details of what was going on with that. I still remember when that video first surfaced, and my wife at first was like, "Oh my gosh, this is awful." But the immediate spin was, "Look how bad police are. Look how bad the authority is." But that wasn't an attack on police because they want their own police. This is how communism works. It was an attack on law and order, the idea of law and order, using
chaos to destabilize.
Exactly. And you destabilize, and then you raise your own. Remember how BLM was, they were proposing, well, we need community therapists and organizers to come in, and we'll police ourselves. Well, that leads to...
That's a commune.
Yes. Yes. And guess what? Most of the time, those people don't actually get punished for what they do.
I remember them saying that, and I was thinking, you're going to send in social workers? That's not going to end well.
Yeah. You want to send a social worker in to somebody that's high on bath salts? They're going to get their face eaten off.
Yeah.
So, and so here's where we're at. Bring on the counter-revolution. This is Chris Rufo. Chris Rufo writes some amazing stuff. Conservatives need a national agenda that reclaims American institutions from the left. The blueprint exists from a surprising source. Ironically, stuff like the Black Panther Party, which is interesting. It's an interesting article. I would definitely say you guys should go read it and read some of Chris Rufo's other writings about this stuff. He's very much on the tip of the spear when it comes to this kind of thing.
He's one of the ones that's been talking about the repeal of the Civil Rights Act.
Yes, and so this is where you get into a problem. The Civil Rights Act was. This is just how communists work. And I'm going to go off on a tangent, and I know we've got to shut down. But anyways, one of the issues is that we are supposed to believe that at some point, spoiler alert, the Republican Party is who passed the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s to bring equality, to end Jim Crow, to do all of these things. And when it was first passed, I believe it was the right thing to do at the time. Then we are supposed to believe, this is how Democrats try and spin the web, that all of a sudden, after voting for the Civil Rights Act, every single Republican all of a sudden became the most racist jerks in the history of mankind. And the Democrats, who had been historically racist, were no longer racist, and they were the most benevolent pro-minority party in the history of humanity.
Ku Klux Klan forgotten. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And it's a complete rewriting of history, but that's how communism works. And then they posit this narrative, and they use their stooges in the media to push these narratives so that a generation from now, everybody's going like, oh yeah, racist Republicans. No, that's not how it was. That's not how it is. So this is the lies that have been told, and we have been gaslighted, and we have been lied to, and we have been told that up is down, and men are women, and women are men, and we cannot have this. This is two different gospels. So this is how I'm going to end it. Why is critical theory a lie? You cannot serve two masters, as I said earlier. It's not just a biblical proverb. It's a warning. And in today's church, we're being asked to serve Christ and bow the knee to critical theory. We're being done this by bully tactics. And a lot of our church leaders are too scared to stand up for this, although we are seeing more and more doing it, and that's good. Critical theory is and its offshoot, critical race theory, aren't just bad sociology. They're rather a religion dressed up as in academic robes and cultural hashtags. So we have to make sure that we can interpret this, and we have to use history as the reference point. Listen to the language that's been being spoken in these circles, because it's the same language. It's the same exact thing that they were talking about in 1919 in Russia, in the 1950s in China, in the 1960s and 70s in Cambodia, and in Africa in the 1980s and 90s, even to today. So this is the the crux of what we're talking and what we have been talking about for a couple of months now on these episodes. They don't just reinterpret history, they rewrite reality. Men or women, all of that kind of thing. You can be whatever you want to. No, there is truth. Critical theory teaches the world is divided by oppressors and oppressed, not based on sin and righteousness. It is purely group identity, race, gender, sexuality, and class. You're either guilty or innocent. There is no grace. It is a graceless religion, unlike our religion that actually gives forgiveness and gives us the ability to make things right. But because your skin color or your privilege score, see China for ESG score, that's what they're trying to implement here. But Christianity teaches us that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That's Romans 3:23. That your biggest problem isn't whiteness, capitalism, patriarchy. It's sin. And the greatest hope isn't equity and reparations. It is the cross of Jesus Christ. Critical theory says truth is subjective and what matters is your lived experience. The gospel says truth is objective, eternal, and embodied in a person. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So CRT says forgiveness isn't possible without systematic upheaval and social revolution. Christianity says forgiveness was purchased by one for all at Calvary. CRT demands constant repentance and to culture. Christ calls for repentance to God. You guys see the difference there? It's polar opposite. We are not subject to a credit score. We're not subject to some sort of upheaval of judgment from mankind. We're only judged by God. And that's the reality of it. So as we move forward, as we continue to be aware of these things, to continue to be enlightened by the truth, and when you actually understand the truth, you can spot the lie. You can spot the counterfeit if you hold the real. And so I would encourage each and every one of us to make sure that we are, first of all, establishing the truth in our life. If you don't know who Jesus is, I would love to actually talk to you about that. If you are a believer and maybe you need to get a little bit more involved, let's pick up your Bible and start reading about the truth, because the truth will identify the lie. And it's very, very important that we understand this. So I wanted to give a shout out before we actually close out to Dale, who's always posting some very interesting stuff. Let me open this up. And this is, hold on. For some reason, when I put these in here, it adds a couple of extra digits at the end and it messes it up.
It's probably because you copied it out of Signal.
Yeah, that's probably true. So this kind of starts where I left off, and this doesn't necessarily have to do with what I've been talking about with Christianity, but it is indicative of what's going on. And Dale submitted this, and it is how the far left links capitalism and Israel to the Israel-Palestine. So I don't know if you guys saw in the riots, and this is kind of coming full circle. There's a lot of Palestinian flags in those rioters. I thought they were protesting like Mexicans being deported, but yet there's a lot of Palestinian flags in there. I don't know if you guys have seen that. Yes, you've probably seen that.
I saw a lot of. There was one particular individual. I forget what flag he was flying, but it was a South American flag. It wasn't Mexico. It was something else. They were flying a whole bunch of different flags. So, and the other thing that people have to understand too is that the socialist radicals, they could give a damn about Israel and Palestine.
Correct.
That all they care about is the destruction of capitalism. And guess what?
Segue. So this is Karlin Boroshenko, as we have talked about her, and we're still planning on getting her on, and maybe we'll do a standalone episode, just kind of allowing her to talk about all of the stuff. She does insane levels of work on this stuff. This is talking about kind of the falsity of the Israel-Palestine stuff and what it's actually really about. Let's watch this. 2 minutes, 22 seconds, and we're going to close it out. Oh, if I can get it to go up there.
Vestiges of feudalism, and then capitalism was birthed out of that. Having trade overseas to sort of expand that reach and influence and extract resources from abroad, which is sort of where you see the policy of colonization coming into play, which is kind of an innate thing that capitalism has in its necessity to expand and continue to extract resources from the world. So I'll go into capitalism for a little while. So like I said, with political power, the wealthy under feudalism developed a political economic system to support and expand their wealth and power, which was capitalism. But of course, what is capitalism?
Private
the
property
main features
ownership
of capitalism are the private ownership of the means of production, which is
So
private
close.
property.
Yo!
Private property, not your stuff.
Winning, 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 winning. Capitalism is private property ownership.
But of course, what is capitalism? The main features of capitalism are the private ownership of the means of production, which is private property.
Okay, so that's important what they just said. Colonization is capitalism's desire to expand and extract resources from the world. Okay. So let's relate this back to Israel and Palestine. If the left sees Israel and Palestine as the capitalist oppressor versus the oppressed proletarian indigenous, then what that means is that Israel are the settler colonists. That's what they call them, the settler colonists. Colonization is capitalism's desire to expand and extract resources of the world. Israel represents the expansion of capitalism to take the property from the indigenous people and privatize it in order to exploit them for resources. It's not because they're Jewish. It's because it has to do with the land, has to do with colonization. These are two very, very, very different problems. If you try to solve communism by, and this is ironic, okay, because, you know, the dissident right has their opinions on this as well. If you try to solve communism by calling them all anti-Semites and then solving the problem, the quote unquote problem that you created of anti-Semitism, you're not going to be solving a problem that has anything to do with what they're actually doing. That's what people are doing when they're saying that all of this is because of anti-Semitism, we're going to solve anti-Semitism, we're going to wipe the scourge of anti-Semitism. They're not being anti-Semitic. So you might be doing something, but you're not actually solving the problem.
Boom.
Boom. It's a mic drop. And it's true because they come back to capitalism, which is private property ownership. So anytime
everything and everything is private property.
Correct. Even government owned is owned privately by a government, by the way. Somebody is in control of that property. And this is why I rail against things like property taxes, because it is antithetical to actual property ownership. But that wraps it up for us. I know we went about 12 minutes over. This has been an important subject matter for us to cover, and we're not going to back away from this. We're obviously going to do more, give you guys more information, because the roots of all of this in communism and socialism and Marxism. Anybody that says democratic socialism is the answer, no, because it's still socialism. It still has its roots in the evil that has killed over 100 million people in the last 100 years. And I'm not joking, that's actually the low end of the spectrum, up to 165 million people. That's a lot of death. That's a lot of destruction for something that's supposed to be utopia. So we have to guard against this stuff. I would like to thank you guys for sticking with us in this series, and how we need to go forward is we need to be vehemently anti-communism. Talk to people that have survived communistic rule. And they'll tell you they have such vitriol to that. Like if you mention communism, they're like, "Where's a communist? I'm going to beat the snot out of them." I mean, it's literally like that.
And my final piece of advice on this: when you see them and you hear them, call them out.
Yep. And when somebody says something about capitalism, correct them. Say, "Oh, you mean private property ownership?" Oh, no. Like no, that's what it means. Know the terms that you're using, and correct people when they are actually going down these tangents on false ideologies and lies. Guys, we're going to shut it down. I really appreciate you coming alongside us, and I am going to pray us out, and then we're going to close it out. So if you guys want to join me. Heavenly Father, I once again am so thankful for the opportunity to bring the truth and the research that we have done on this very, very important topic of really what is amounts to evil in the world and how we should identify it and we should fight against it. Lord, I pray that you equip us with knowledge so that we can fight on the area on the plane of ideology, so that we don't ever get to the physical fight. I pray that you help us to be open to your voice and the truth that you speak in your word. Lord, I pray that everyone be safe, everybody come back to see us again, and that you would help us in our day-to-day lives to put you first. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Guys, we'll see you guys on Tuesday with another episode, and until then, keep God first, be prepared, and God bless America.
Hoorah.
Live in a swamp down in ODC where it bubbles all the time like a giant carbonated soda. It's soda. Saw a mystic being sitting on a log. I asked him his name and in a booming voice he said MAGA, M-A-G-A, MAGA, MAGA. But I ain't never seen Trump who looks like Yoda and he's wrinkled green. Oh, my MAGA, my MAGA. Well, I'm not dumb, but I can't understand how we can lift my heart just by leading the land. Oh, my MAGA, my MAGA, my MAGA. Well, I left home just a week before, and I've never ever been a patron before. The General Flynn, he set me straight, of course. He said, go to Donald and they'll show you the falls. But I'm not the kind that will argue with faith, so it looks like I'm gonna start all over again with my MAGA, my MAGA, my MAGA. Let the means be a guide on my MAGA, my MAGA. No, Joe Biden really got you annoyed. Remember, if you defeat him, then the Dems are destroyed. Oh, my MAGA, my MAGA, my MAGA.